I accepted my grandmother's offer and left my graduation dinner halfway through the main course. The night air outside the steakhouse was cool, a sharp contrast to the humid, suffocating heat of that dining room. My grandmother, Nana, didn't say a word as we walked to her old Buick. She just gripped her purse tight, her jaw set like she was ready to go to war. I sat in the passenger seat and stared at the check in my hand. $10,000. It felt heavier than it looked. Behind us, I could see the silhouette of the restaurant windows. I knew my mother was probably mid-meltdown, and my father was likely rubbing Lily's back while she played up the stress-induced chest pains that always conveniently appeared when someone else got a win. We drove in silence for the first 20 minutes. I kept waiting for the guilt to hit. I'd been conditioned for 18 years to feel like a criminal every time I took up space or used a resource that could have gone to Lily, but the guilt didn't come. Instead, there was this weird, hollow buzzing in my ears. "You're staying with me tonight," Nana said, her voice gravelly but firm, "and every night until you leave for school. We'll go back to your house tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Your parents will be at work, and Lily will be at her physical therapy, which we all know is just a glorified nap at the spa. We're getting your things. They'll change the locks, Nana," I said. It wasn't a guess. It was how they handled any perceived betrayal. "Let them," she snapped. "I have a key. I gave your father the down payment for that house 20 years ago. If he wants to play games with locks, he can explain it to a locksmith while I'm standing on the porch." When we got to her house, she made me a cup of tea. It was 11:30 p.m. I sat at her kitchen table, a sturdy oak thing that had been there since before I was born, and looked at the photos on her fridge. There were dozens of me. Me at 6, holding a toad. Me at 10, wearing a plastic medal from a swim meet. Me at 14, covered in dirt from a landscaping job. My parents' fridge back home was a shrine to Lily. My face was nowhere to be found there. The next morning, the messages started. My phone buzzed on the nightstand at 6:29. It was my mother. "How could you? On a night that was supposed to be about family unity, you let your grandmother humiliate us. You are a cold, calculated child. Give her back that check. We need that money for your sister's life-saving surgery." I didn't reply. I watched the bubbles of the text appearing and disappearing. At 8 a.m., my father, "Son, you've crossed a line. Your mother is inconsolable. Lily had a panic attack because of the scene you caused. We are your parents. We have sacrificed everything for this family. If you don't come home and apologize, don't expect a ride to the airport next week." I deleted the thread. We arrived at the house at 10:15 a.m. Nana was right. The driveway was empty. We used her key and walked in. The house smelled like the expensive lavender candles my mother burned to calm Lily's nerves. It felt like walking into a museum dedicated to a girl who wasn't even sick anymore. I went to my room. It was small, tucked at the end of the hall, and mostly served as storage for Lily's old pageant trophies and boxes of medical supplies that had expired years ago. I pulled my duffel bags out from under the bed. I didn't have much. Most of what I owned I had bought myself. My clothes, my books, my worn-out sneakers. I was packing my desk when I found the envelope. It was tucked into the back of a drawer. It contained the receipts from the last 3 years of my landscaping work. I'd kept them to prove to myself that I existed, that I was capable of building something. I shoved them into my bag. "They're here," Nana called from the hallway. I froze. It was only 11 a.m. My father's truck pulled into the driveway, followed by my mother's SUV. They must have seen the Buick on the Ring camera and raced home. The front door slammed. "Where is he?" my mother shrieked. I walked out of my room and met them in the hallway. My father looked tired, but my mother looked lethal. Lily was trailing behind them, leaning heavily on the doorframe, her hand over her heart in that practiced tragic pose she'd perfected since she was 8. "Give me the check, Leo," my father said. He didn't yell. He used that disappointed but firm voice he used when he was trying to sound like the adult in the room. "You're being manipulated by your grandmother's bitterness. She's using you to hurt us. She gave me the money for my education," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. "The money you told me you didn't have. We have it. We just need it for your sister's health," my mother yelled. "She's going to Europe. Do you want her to die? Is that what this is? You've always been jealous of her. From the day she was born, you've tried to steal the spotlight." I looked at Lily. She was watching me, waiting for the moment I'd cave. She had a faint, smug smile on her face that my parents couldn't see because their backs were to her. "I'm not jealous, Mom," I said. "I'm just done. I've been valedictorian. I've worked 40 hours a week every summer. I've fixed your house, and I've cooked your dinners. And last night, at my graduation dinner, you didn't even know what I wanted to eat. You ordered Lily's favorite food for my celebration. We were celebrating the news about the specialist," she cried. "It was a miracle." "It was a Tuesday," Nana said, stepping up behind me. She put a hand on my shoulder. "The specialist has been there for years. You just chose last night to bring it up because you couldn't stand a single hour where the conversation wasn't about your miracle daughter. Now, move aside. Leo is leaving." My father stepped in front of the door. "He's 18, but he's still under my roof. He's not going anywhere until he hands over that money. It's family money. Nana, you gave it to a member of this family, and as the head of this household, I am directing it where it's needed most." "The head of the household?" Nana laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "You haven't been the head of anything since you let your wife turn your son into a ghost. And as for the money, I wrote the check to Leo. If you touch it, I'll call the police and report it as theft. I've got the bank on speed dial." The standoff lasted for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 30 seconds. My father looked at Nana, then at me, then at the checkbook sticking out of my pocket. He knew she wasn't bluffing. Nana had always been the one with the spine in the family. "Fine," he spat. Go with her. But don't you dare call us when you run out of money. Don't you dare come crawling back when you realize the world doesn't care about your grades as much as we care about your sister's life. You're dead to us, Leo. You're not our son anymore." "I haven't been your son for a long time," I said. I pushed past him. As I walked through the living room, I grabbed one thing off the mantel, a small framed photo of my grandfather, Nana's late husband. It was the only photo in the house that didn't have Lily in it. We got into the car and drove away. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look at the window where I knew Lily would be watching, waiting for the drama to peak. The next few days were a blur of logistics. Nana took me to the bank to deposit the check. We opened a new account, one that my parents' names had never been near. We went to a tech store and bought a laptop that actually worked, a sleek, fast machine that didn't take 10 minutes to boot up like the ancient desktop I'd been using for schoolwork. But the silence from my parents was the loudest part. For years, my phone had been a tether. "Leo, pick up Lily's prescription. Leo, the lawn needs mowing. Leo, why didn't you defrost the chicken?" Now, it was just empty. 3 days before I was supposed to leave for college, I was sitting on Nana's porch when a car pulled up. It wasn't my parents. It was my Aunt Sarah, my mother's younger sister. She'd been at the dinner, but she'd stayed quiet, as she usually did. She walked up the steps and sat down next to me. She handed me a small envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Something your mom doesn't know about?" Sarah said. She looked tired. "I've watched it for years, Leo. We all have. The way they treat you. It's not right. We didn't say anything because we didn't want to start a war with your mother, but after what Nana did at the steakhouse, I realized we were being cowards." I opened the envelope. It was $500 in cash. "It's for books," she said, "or pizza, or whatever kids do at college when they aren't studying their brains out. Your Uncle Mike and I, we're proud of you. Valedictorian. That's a big deal, Leo. A really really big deal. I felt a lump in my throat for the first time since leaving. Thanks, Sarah. And Leo? She said, standing up. Lily isn't going to Europe. I called the clinic they mentioned. There is no preventative procedure. Your mother was trying to raise money for a wellness retreat in the Swiss Alps. It's a vacation, Leo. A $40,000 vacation for the two of them. The air left my lungs. I wasn't even surprised. That was the worst part. I just felt a deep, profound exhaustion. Does Dad know? Your dad believes whatever your mother tells him because it's easier than admitting he failed you, she said. She hugged me tight, the first real hug I'd had in months, and left. That night, the final blow came from Lily. She called me at midnight. I almost didn't answer, but I wanted to hear what she had to say. Leo? Her voice was small, shaky. The sick girl voice. What do you want, Lily? I'm really scared, she whispered. My chest is tight. Mom and Dad are at a fundraising meeting, and I'm home alone. I think I need to go to the ER. A year ago, I would have dropped everything. I would have called 911, raced over there, and stayed by her side until the doctors told us for the 100th time that her vitals were perfect. Call 911 then, I said. I can't. I'm too weak to reach the phone. You have to come. You're talking to me on the phone right now, Lily, I said. The silence on the other end was heavy. Then, the mask slipped. Her voice dropped an octave, becoming cold and sharp. You think you're so smart. You think you're better than us because you're leaving, but you'll be back. You don't know how to live without being the help. You'll fail, and you'll come back, and I'll make sure Mom and Dad never let you through that door. I'm never coming back, Lily, I said. And for the record, I hope you enjoy Switzerland. I hear the air is great for fake heart conditions. I hung up and blocked her. Then I blocked my mother. Then I blocked my father. The morning I left for college, Nana drove me to the airport. She didn't cry. She just held my hand for a long time at the security gate. You have everything? She asked. Yeah. The laptop, the books, the clothes. I'm good. You have more than that, she said. You have a life. Don't look back at the shadows, Leo. They only exist if you keep standing in the dark. I walked through security and didn't look back. I've been at school for a term now. It's hard. The classes are brutal, and I'm working 20 hours a week in the university's IT department to make sure I don't have to ask Nana for another dime. But every night, when I walk back to my dorm, I look at the lights of the campus and realize something. No one here knows about the sick sister. No one here knows me as the boy who mows lawns and fixes leaks. They know me as the guy who gets the highest marks in advanced calculus. They know me as the guy who makes a mean pot of coffee at 3 a.m. in the study lounge. I got a postcard from Nana yesterday. It was a picture of a beach. On the back she wrote, "Your parents tried to sell your bedroom furniture on Facebook Marketplace. I went over and bought it all for $50. It's in my guest room now. Your room is waiting for you at Christmas, but only if you want to be here. No pressure. Keep shining." I put the postcard on my desk, right next to my valedictorian medal. For the first time in 18 years, the sun isn't Lily. It's not my parents' approval. It's not the fear of someone else's health. The sun is me, and I'm finally starting to feel the warmth. The second semester hit like a physical weight. College wasn't just about the grades anymore. It was about the stamina. I was working the late shift at the IT help desk, tucked away in the basement of the library, surrounded by the hum of servers and the smell of stale coffee. It was quiet down there. No one was screaming about heart monitors or family loyalty, just the rhythmic clicking of keyboards and the blue glow of monitors. My roommate, a guy named Elias who grew up on a farm in Nebraska, was the first person to call me out on my habits. It was a Tuesday night, around 2 a.m., and I was meticulously organizing my budget for the next 3 months down to the cent. "You're doing it again," Elias said, hanging his head over the side of the top bunk. "Doing what?" "Planning for a disaster that isn't happening. You've got enough for the meal plan, Leo. You've got the scholarship. Relax." I looked at my spreadsheet. I had budgeted for a medical emergency for Nana, even though she was the healthiest 70-year-old on the planet. I realized I was still waiting for the floor to drop out. I was waiting for the phone call where someone told me my success was selfish because someone else was suffering. That call finally came in late March. I didn't recognize the number, so I answered. It was my father. His voice sounded older, thinner. "Leo," he said. There was no, "Hello, no, how are you?" Just my name. "Dad. Lily is in the hospital. For real this time. It's a respiratory infection that hit her hard because of her history. She's been asking for you." I sat down on the edge of my dorm bed. My heart didn't race. I didn't feel that old panic. I just felt a cold, clinical curiosity. "Which hospital?" He told me. "It was the local one, 10 minutes from our old house." "Is she on a ventilator?" I asked. "No, but she's on heavy oxygen. The doctors are worried about scarring. Your mother is a wreck. She hasn't slept in 3 days. We need you here, Leo. We need the family together." "I have midterms," I said. It was a lie. My midterms had ended the Friday before. Midterms? He scoffed, and for a second, the old version of him, the one who dismissed my life as a series of minor inconveniences, flashed through. "Your sister might have permanent lung damage and you're worried about a test? Have you really become this heartless?" "I'm not heartless, Dad. I'm just not the person who fixes this anymore. You have the $40,000 from the fundraiser, right? Use that for the best care." The silence on the other end was deafening. We had to use some of that for the mortgage," he muttered. "And the bills. Things have been tight since your grandmother stopped talking to us. She cut off the family trust, Leo. She redirected everything to a scholarship fund in your name." I almost laughed. Nana hadn't told me that. She'd just been sending me postcards about her garden. "I'm not coming, Dad. If it's an emergency, call the doctors. If it's a guilt trip, call a therapist. I'm hanging up now." I did, and then I turned my phone off for the rest of the night. I spent the next 4 hours staring at the ceiling. I thought about the times I had sat in hospital waiting rooms as a kid, eating vending machine crackers while my parents cried over Lily's minor arrhythmias. I thought about the graduation dinner where I was invisible. 2 days later, Nana called. "She's fine," Nana said, her voice dry. "It was a bad flu. She's already posting selfies from the hospital bed with the oxygen mask pulled down so people can see her lip gloss. Your mother is trying to start a new GoFundMe for post-recovery trauma. Thanks for the heads up, Nana." "You okay, Leo?" "I am. I think I'm finally done waiting for the other shoe to drop." "Good, because life isn't a series of shoes dropping. It's just a long walk. You might as well enjoy the view." That summer, I didn't go back, not even to Nana's. I took an internship with a tech firm in the city where my university was located. It paid well enough that I could rent a tiny, windowless studio apartment near the tracks. It was the best 3 months of my life. I spent my days coding and my nights exploring the city. I bought a secondhand bike. I learned how to cook something other than whatever Lily likes. I made friends who liked me because I was funny or because I was good at chess, not because I was a reliable pair of hands to do their chores. In August, right before the fall semester started, I got a package. It was a heavy box with no return address, but I knew the handwriting. It was my mother's. Inside were all my old swim medals, the ones they'd ignored, the ones I thought were lost in the back of the garage. They were tangled together, the ribbons dusty and frayed. There was a note on top, written on a piece of Lily's personalized stationery. "We're cleaning out your room to make a fitness suite for Lily's rehab. Since you care so much about your own achievements, you can have these back. We don't have room for ghosts anymore." I looked at the medals. I remembered the cold water of the pool. I remembered the burn in my lungs as I touched the wall and looked up to see an empty spot in the bleachers where my parents should have been. I took the box down to the basement of my apartment building building and put it in the communal trash bin. I didn't need the medals to remind me I had won. I was living in a city where no one knew my name unless I introduced myself. I was paying my own bills. I was building a future that didn't require someone else to be sick for me to be important. I walked back up to my studio, sat at my new laptop, and started working on a project for my senior thesis. The sun was setting, casting a long golden strip of light across my floor. I sat right in the middle of it. I wasn't a shadow. I wasn't in orbit. I was just Leo, and for the first time, that was more than enough. Junior year was the year I stopped checking the weather back home. I didn't need to know if it was raining in a town that didn't miss me. I landed a specialized internship with a firm that handled cybersecurity for healthcare networks. It felt ironic, given my history, but I was good at it. I understood how systems failed when they were neglected. I spent 40 hours a week hunting for vulnerabilities in code, and for the first time, my obsession with detail, the same trait that helped me survive 18 years of being the reliable one, was actually paying off in cold, hard cash. I was sitting in the campus cafe in October, halfway through a sandwich, when a girl I didn't recognize sat down across from me. She looked like she'd been crying. "You're Leo, right?" she asked. I nodded slowly, my hand tightening around my phone. I didn't know her, but she had that look, that frantic, everything is a crisis energy that I'd spent my life sprinting away from. "I'm Chloe. I go to school with Lily. We're in the same sorority." I took a bite of my sandwich. I didn't say a word. I knew exactly where this was going. "She's in a really bad way, Leo. Her heart. The doctors say the stress of you leaving literally weakened her cardiac muscles. She has this broken heart syndrome thing. She's been in and out of clinics all semester. Your parents are exhausted. They're selling the house to move closer to a treatment center in California." I swallowed the bite. It tasted like cardboard. "Is that so? How can you be so callous?" Chloe's voice went up a notch, drawing looks from the tables nearby. "She's your sister. She's dying, and you're sitting here eating lunch like a robot. She cries your name in her sleep. Your mom told me you stole $10,000 from their medical fund and ran away." I leaned back. I looked at this girl, this stranger who had been fed a diet of lies and melodrama until she felt righteous enough to track me down. "Did she tell you about the European specialist?" I asked. Chloe blinked. "What?" "Ask her about the $40,000 they raised for a surgery that doesn't exist. Ask her why she was posting photos from a beach in Florida the week she was supposedly clinging to life in the ICU. And as for the money, it was my grandmother's. My parents haven't seen a cent of it because they don't deserve it." "You're lying," she whispered, but the certainty in her eyes was flickering. "Go back to your sorority house, Chloe. Tell Lily that if she wants to play the martyr, she needs to find a better audience. I'm out of the theater business." She left, tripping over her own feet in her rush to get away from me. I finished my sandwich. My hands didn't shake. A week later, I got a formal letter in the mail. It wasn't a text or a frantic voicemail. It was a legal notice from an attorney back home. My father was suing Nana. He was claiming elder abuse and undue influence. He was arguing that Nana wasn't of sound mind when she gave me that $10,000, and when she cut the rest of the family out of her will, he wanted the money back, and he wanted control over her estate. I didn't even call my parents. I called Nana. "I know," she said before I could even say hello. Her voice sounded sharper than ever. "The idiot actually did it. He thinks because I'm 71, I've lost my marbles. He forgot that I'm the one who kept the books for his grandfather's business for 30 years. What do we do?" I asked. "Nothing. You stay in school. I've already hired the best estate lawyer in the state. I've got medical evaluations from 3 different doctors proving I'm sharper than your father ever was. And Leo, I've decided to move." "Move? Where?" "I sold the house. I'm moving to a luxury retirement community 2 miles from your campus. I want to see you graduate, and I want to see your first real office. I'm done living in a town full of ghosts." The court case lasted 3 months. I had to fly back once to give a deposition. I sat in a sterile conference room across from my father. He wouldn't look me in the eye. He looked gray, defeated. My mother wasn't there. She was apparently at home caring for Lily, who had magically developed a nerve condition the moment the lawsuit started. The judge threw the case out in 20 minutes. Not only was Nana declared perfectly sane, but her lawyer produced evidence that my father had attempted to take out a second mortgage on her house using a forged signature. The judge didn't just dismiss the suit. He referred the forgery to the district attorney. As we walked out of the courthouse, my father finally caught my arm. "Leo, please," he croaked. "The house is gone. The bank is foreclosing. If the DA presses charges, I'll lose my job. Talk to her. Tell her to drop it. We're your parents." I looked at his hand on my sleeve. I remembered being 7 years old, crying because I'd fallen off my bike and skinned both knees, and him telling me to be quiet because Lily was napping and her heart couldn't handle the noise. "You're not my parents," I said, peeling his fingers off my arm. "You're just people I used to know. If you want mercy, ask Lily. I hear she's great at pretending to care." Nana moved into her new place in December. It was beautiful top floor, overlooking the river, with a 2-4-hour security desk. No one could get in without an invite. On Christmas Eve, I sat on her balcony with a mug of hot chocolate. The city was quiet below us. "I heard from Sarah," Nana said, leaning against the railing. "Your father took a plea deal. No jail time, but he has a felony on his record now. They're living in a 2-bedroom apartment. Lily had to get a job at a mall kiosk to help with the rent." I pictured Lily, the girl who couldn't walk upstairs without a fainting spell, standing on her feet for 8 hours selling phone cases. "She'll hate that," I said. "She does. She's already tried to faint 3 times, but the manager told her if she hits the floor again, she's fired. Miraculously, her health has improved." We laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, just the sound of 2 people who were finally free. I graduated 6 months later. Summa cum laude. There were no banners this time, no awkward steakhouse dinners. Just me, Nana, and Aunt Sarah sitting in the sun on the university lawn. When they called my name, I walked across the stage and shook the dean's hand. I didn't look for my parents in the crowd. I didn't need to. I knew exactly where I stood. After the ceremony, I took Nana to a quiet Italian place, just the 3 of us. I ordered the lobster ravioli, the thing I had wanted at my high school graduation, but wasn't allowed to have. "To the scholar," Nana said, raising her glass. "To the survivor," Sarah added. I looked at my diploma. It was just a piece of paper, but to me, it was a deed. I owned myself now. The mortgage of guilt had been paid in full. I started my full-time job the following Monday. 6-figure starting salary, full benefits, and an office with a window. My first paycheck arrived 2 weeks later. I didn't put it in a shoebox under a floorboard. I didn't hide it from anyone. I went to a jewelry store and bought a small gold locket for Nana. Inside, I put a picture of the 2 of us at my graduation. I don't think about the house with the lavender candles anymore. I don't think about the sister who used her heart as a leash. I just wake up, make my coffee, and go to work. My grandmother was right. The best way to get revenge on people who try to make you invisible is to become too bright for them to ignore. But I realized something else too. You don't shine for them. You shine because you finally stopped letting them blow out your light. I'm Leo. I'm a software engineer. I'm a grandson. And for the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. 5 years later, I didn't even recognize the area code when my phone buzzed on the mahogany desk of my own office. I was a senior architect now, leading a team of 12. My life was measured in clean code, successful deployments, and the quiet quiet, steady rhythm of a man who knew exactly where his next meal was coming from. I let it go to voicemail. I had a meeting. It wasn't until I was sitting in my apartment that evening, a place with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the skyline that Lily would have killed for, that I listened to it. Leo, it's Lily. Her voice wasn't the airy, tragic whisper of my childhood. It was sharp, exhausted, and punctuated by the sound of a heavy door slamming in the background. Mom and Dad are losing the apartment. Dad's consulting jobs dried up because of the felony. And Mom, she's not well, Leo. For real this time. She's had a stroke. We're at the county hospital. They won't give her the private room she needs because we don't have the insurance. I know you're rich now. I see your LinkedIn. Just call me, please, for Mom. I deleted the message. I didn't even hesitate. 10 minutes later, Nana called. She'd moved into an even nicer assisted living suite with a garden view, and I visited her every Sunday. Did she call you? Nana asked. Yeah. Deleted it. Good. Sarah called me an hour ago. Your mother did have a thanks in advance. A mini stroke. She's going to be fine. But she's hysterical because the hospital staff won't treat her like royalty. Your father tried to use my name to get a line of credit at the billing desk. I had my lawyer send a cease and desist to the hospital administration within 20 minutes. They never stop, do they? I asked, looking out at the city lights. Parasites don't stop until the host dies or walks away, Nana said. You walked away, Leo. Don't let them trip you into coming back. I stayed away. I didn't send flowers. I didn't send a check. I spent that weekend hiking in the mountains with a woman I'd been seeing for 6 months, a cardiologist, ironically enough, who found my family's history of medical theater both fascinating and repulsive. The final confrontation didn't happen in a hospital or a courtroom. It happened at Nana's funeral 2 years later. She went peacefully, in her sleep, at 82. She left me everything, the estate, the investments, and a letter that told me to buy a boat and name it Times, the Scholar. I was standing by the grave, the service just ending, when a rusted-out sedan pulled up to the cemetery gates. 3 people got out. My father had lost 50 pounds he couldn't afford to lose. His suit was 3 sizes too big and shiny at the elbows. My mother was in a wheelchair, her face slightly slumped on the left side, but her eyes were still darting around, looking for an audience. And Lily looked 30 going on 50. The miracle child was wearing a cheap black dress and shoes with scuffed heels. The smugness was gone, replaced by a desperate, hungry look. They approached the grave after the other mourners had cleared out. I stood my ground. My partner, Maya, stood beside me, her hand resting firmly on my arm. Leo, my father said. He reached out as if to hug me, but I stepped back. Don't, I said. We just wanted to pay our respects, my mother slurred. She was my mother, Leo. You had no right to keep us from her these last years. She kept herself from you, I said. She changed her phone number 3 times. She blocked your letters. She didn't want you here, and frankly, neither do I. Lily stepped forward, her eyes wet. Leo, look at us. We're living in a trailer. Dad is working security at a warehouse. I'm waitressing double shifts. We've suffered enough. Nana's will. We know she left you the house sale money and the accounts. It's millions, isn't it? Just a small fraction would change our lives. We're family. I looked at them. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the urge to scream about the swim meets or the graduation dinner or the shoebox under the floorboards. I just felt nothing. They were strangers who happened to share my DNA. The money is staying exactly where Nana put it, I said. In a trust for first-generation college students from low-income backgrounds. The Leo and Nana scholarship. It's already been signed over. It was a lie. Only half the estate went to the scholarship. The rest was mine. But they didn't need to know that. My mother let out a strangled cry. You'd give our inheritance to strangers after everything Lily has been through? You're a monster. I'm the monster you created by making me invisible, I said. You wanted a ghost? Well, ghosts don't sign checks. They don't provide for the people who ignored them. You have each other. Isn't that what you always said? Family comes first? I turned to Maya. Let's go. As we walked toward my car, a German SUV that cost more than their trailer, I heard Lily scream my name. She called me selfish. She called me a traitor. My father started shouting about filial duty. I didn't turn around. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove out of the cemetery. I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. They were standing by the piles of funeral flowers. 3 small gray figures shrinking against the horizon. They looked exactly like what they were. People who had spent their entire lives trying to suck the light out of someone else, only to find themselves standing in the dark. I reached over and took Maya's hand. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said, and I meant it. I'm great. We drove back to the city. I went to work the next morning. I lived my life. I haven't heard from them since, and I don't expect to. I'm not a shadow anymore. I'm not a servant. I'm not a ghost. I'm the man who walked out of a steakhouse halfway through the main course and never looked back. And the view from here is spectacular. 10 years after the funeral, I found myself standing in a glass-walled boardroom on the 50th floor of a skyscraper in Chicago. I was the CEO of my own firm now. We specialized in decentralized security building walls that couldn't be breached by people who didn't belong. I was 40 years old. My hair was graying at the temples, and I had a daughter of my own, Maya, named after my wife. She was 8, and she was currently obsessed with robotics. That morning, she had shown me a clumsy, whirring machine she'd built that could pick up a soda can. I had canceled my first 3 meetings to watch her demonstrate it. I didn't just watch. I filmed it. I cheered, and I took her out for pancakes afterward. I was giving her the childhood I'd had to build for myself out of scrap wood and spite. My assistant, a sharp woman named Elena, knocked on the door. Mr. Vance? There's someone in the lobby. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says he's your brother-in-law. I paused, a fountain pen mid-stroke over a contract. I don't have a brother-in-law, Elena. He says his name is Marcus. He's very insistent. He says it's about Lily. I felt a ghost of a chill, but it didn't settle. Send him up. 5 minutes later, a man walked in. He was younger than me, maybe early 30s, wearing a suit that was trying too hard. It was polyester, shiny, and the tie was knotted too tight. He looked like a man who spent his life chasing opportunities that always turned out to be scams. Leo, he said, extending a hand. I'm Marcus. I've heard so much about you. I didn't take the hand. I sat back in my chair. I doubt that. If you've heard the truth, you wouldn't be here. What do you want, Marcus? He deflated a little, his salesman grin faltering. Lily's in a bad way. We've been married 3 years. I didn't know. I didn't know about the history until recently. She told me you were a trust fund kid who cut the family off because of a misunderstanding. Is that the story now? I asked. She's got a kid, Leo. A boy. He's 4. His name is Leo. After you. I felt a surge of pure, unfiltered disgust. They'd named a child after me as a tactical move, a long game play for sympathy. The boy has the same heart condition, Marcus continued, his voice dropping into that familiar practiced tremor, the one Lily had. The doctors say he needs a specialist, a private clinic in Boston. We're buried in debt, and Lily, she's depressed. She says you're the only one who can save him. I looked at Marcus. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been drained dry by a woman who knew exactly how to manufacture a crisis. I realized Lily hadn't changed. She'd just found a new host. Marcus, I said, my voice calm and cold. Does the boy actually have a heart condition? Have you seen the scans? Have you talked to the doctors without Lily in the room? Marcus blinked. I mean, she says, go home. I said, go home and ask for the medical records, not the printouts she gives you. the actual digital portal access. If the boy is truly sick, send me the doctor's name and the facility. I won't give you a dime, but I will pay the hospital directly for his care. Not for Lily's recovery, not for your travel expenses, just the bill. Marcus looked hopeful for a split second. But, I added, leaning forward, if you find out she's lying, and she is, Marcus, because that's the only thing she knows how to do, leave her. Take the boy and go, because she will eat you alive until there's nothing left but a shiny suit and a mountain of debt. He left without saying another word. I never heard from him again. I checked the medical registry a month later for a patient with my nephew's name. There were no records of a cardiac specialist in Boston seeing a child by that name. The final chapter of that life closed 3 months later when I received a package from a small-town lawyer in my old state. My mother had passed away. My father had gone 2 years prior, a quiet death in a state-run nursing home that I hadn't even been notified about. The package contained a single item. It wasn't jewelry or money. It was a scrapbook. I opened it, expecting more photos of Lily, but as I turned the pages, I stopped. It was full of clippings. Every time my company had been mentioned in a trade journal, every time I'd been featured in a top 40 under 40 list, every news article about the scholarship fund I'd started with Nana's money. At the very back, on the last page, there was a handwritten note from my mother. It was dated a week before her stroke. Leo, I kept these because I wanted to show people that my son was successful, but I realized I couldn't show anyone, because then I'd have to admit you did it without us. I spent 40 years pretending Lily was the miracle because I was too weak to admit that you were the one we should have been following. You weren't a shadow. We were just blind. I looked at the note. I looked at the clippings. I didn't cry. I didn't feel a sudden rush of forgiveness. I just felt a profound sense of closure. She'd spent her last years watching me from the dark, finally realizing that the light she'd tried to extinguish had become a bonfire. I took the scrapbook to the fireplace in my office. I watched the edges curl and turn black. I watched the words, "We were just blind," vanish into the flames. I went home that night and kissed my wife. I went into my daughter's room and helped her wire a new sensor onto her robot. "Dad?" she asked, looking up at me with eyes that were bright, curious, and completely unafraid. "Are you happy?" I looked around my home. I thought about the steakhouse. I thought about the Buick and Nana's grit. I thought about the man I'd become, a man built out of the bricks my family had thrown at me. "I am, Maya," I said. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I wasn't a shadow anymore. I was the architect of my own world, and in my world, the sun never set on the people I loved." The last time I ever saw my sister, it wasn't in a courtroom or a hospital. It was through a glass window in a cramped, fluorescent-lit visitor's center. Marcus had taken my advice. He'd looked for the medical records, found nothing but forged PDF templates and a history of doctor shopping, and he had vanished with their son in the middle of the night. Lily, deprived of her audience and her primary source of income, had spiraled. She didn't just break, she shattered. She'd tried to pull one last emergency to get Marcus back, a staged break-in at her own apartment to claim she was being stalked, but she'd been careless. She'd set a fire to make it look real, and the smoke nearly killed an elderly neighbor in the unit above hers. She was serving 4 years for third-degree arson and insurance fraud. I sat down on the plastic chair and picked up the handset. On the other side of the glass, Lily looked like a stranger. Her hair, once her pride, was thin and dull. Her skin was sallow. She didn't look like a miracle anymore. She just looked like a middle-aged woman who had run out of people to trick. "You came," she said. Her voice was thin, but the old hook was still there, that expectant, demanding lilt. "I'm here to tell you one thing, Lily, and then I'm never coming back. I need a lawyer for the appeal," she interrupted, leaning against the glass. "The one the state gave me as a joke. Leo, I'm dying in here. The air quality. My heart. You know how fragile I am." I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see a monster. I just saw a pathetic, repetitive loop. "You aren't fragile," I said. "You're the strongest person I've ever known. You survived 20 years of lies. You survived a fire you started yourself. You're built like a tank, Lily. You just chose to use all that strength to stay small." She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. "How can you say that? I've been sick my whole life." "No," I said. "You were bored, and Mom and Dad were scared. It was a perfect storm, and you rode it until the boat sank. Marcus is gone. The boy is safe. And Nana's money? It's gone to kids who actually want to build things, not destroy them." "You're a cold-blooded bastard," she hissed, her eyes finally flashing with the real her, the one I'd seen in the hallway when I was 18. "I'm a man who finished his dinner," I said. I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for her to scream. I didn't wait for the guards to lead her away. I walked out of the prison and into the bright, late afternoon sun. I drove back to my house, the one I'd built on the coast, far away from the suburbs and the shadows. Maya was out on the lawn with my wife, teaching her how to fly a drone she'd modified herself. The sound of their laughter carried over the salt air, a clean, honest sound that didn't require any explanation. I sat on the porch and watched them. I thought about the boy I was, sitting at that steakhouse table, looking at a plate of food I didn't want, surrounded by people who didn't see me. I wished I could go back and tell him that it was okay to leave, that the hunger he felt wasn't for the steak, it was for the life waiting for him outside those doors. I picked up a book, leaned back in my chair, and felt the warmth of the sun on my face. It wasn't someone else's son, it was mine. I was Leo Vance. I was a husband, a father, and a man who lived in the truth. And for the rest of my life, that was going to be more than enough. 20 years after I walked out of that steakhouse, I found myself back in my hometown for the first time. I wasn't there for a funeral or a crisis. I was there because the local university, the one that had once been a distant dream I had to claw my way toward, was dedicating a new engineering wing in my name, the Leo Vance Center for Systems Security. I stood in the lobby, surrounded by glass and steel, watching students scramble to classes with laptops tucked under their arms. They looked tired, caffeinated, and full of that desperate, beautiful ambition I remembered so well. A young man approached me. He couldn't have been more than 19. He was wearing a faded hoodie and had the twitchy energy of someone who had spent the last 3 nights pulling code apart. "Mr. Vance?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm one of the scholarship recipients, the Nana Foundation. I wanted to say thank you. My parents, they didn't think I should come. They wanted me to stay home and work the family farm because my brother is well. He's got some issues, and they needed me to be the stable one." I looked at him. I saw the ghost of myself in the set of his jaw. "Did you stay?" I asked. "No," he said, a small, hard smile forming. "I left halfway through the harvest. I just got on a bus. I haven't talked to them in a year." "Good," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Keep going. Don't look back to see if they're watching. They aren't. They're looking at the hole you left, not the person you're becoming. Your job is to be the person." He nodded, shook my hand firmly, and disappeared into the crowd. I spent the rest of the afternoon wandering the campus. I walked past the old park where I used to hide from my parents' frantic phone calls. I drove past the landscaping company where I'd earned my first $1,000. It was a boutique flower shop now. Everything changes, eventually. Before I left town, I made one last stop. I drove to the old cemetery where my parents were buried. I hadn't been to their graves since the day I'd seen them at Nana's funeral. I stood in front of the headstone, a simple gray slab that Lily had likely picked out with the last of the emergency funds before she went to prison. "Beloved parents, forever in our hearts." I looked at the words words. They were a lie, but it was a quiet one now. It didn't have any power over me. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the need to shout at the grass. I just felt a deep, settled peace. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, laminated photo. It was a picture of my daughter, Maya, holding her first-place trophy from the state robotics competition. She was grinning, her hair a mess, her eyes bright with the absolute certainty that she was seen and loved. I didn't leave the photo on the grave. I put it back in my pocket. This wasn't for them. It was for me. I walked back to my car, the engine humming as I turned it over. I programmed my GPS for home the house by the ocean, 3 states away, where my wife was waiting with a bottle of wine and my daughter was waiting to show me her latest unbreakable encryption script. As I drove past the city limit sign, I saw the steakhouse. It was a chain pharmacy now. The parking lot was full of people buying milk and bandages and life's mundane necessities. I realized then that my story wasn't a tragedy. It wasn't even a revenge story. It was a survival story. I had taken the bricks of neglect and built a fortress. I had taken the silence of my childhood and turned it into the peace of my adulthood. I rolled down the window, letting the cool evening air fill the car. I didn't think about Lily and her cell. I didn't think about Marcus or the boy named Leo. I didn't think about the $40,000 vacation or the family-style platters of food I never got to eat. I just thought about the road ahead. I'm Leo Vance. I'm a man who learned that family isn't something you're born into. It's something you build, one honest brick at a time. And as I drove into the sunset, the shadows behind me finally, mercifully, disappeared for good. The years have a way of filing down the sharp edges of a grudge until it just looks like a smooth, unremarkable stone. By the time I hit 50, my life was a fortress of quiet routines. My daughter, Maya, had graduated from MIT and was working on a rover project for a private space firm. She didn't have a heart murmur, she didn't have fainting spells, and she didn't have a single reason to ever doubt that she was the center of my world. My wife and I had moved to a house where the windows faced the sunrise because I spent enough of my youth staring into the dark. I was in my garden, pruning the hydrangeas, when a car I didn't recognize pulled into the long gravel driveway. I didn't reach for a phone or feel a spike of adrenaline. I just kept my shears in my hand and waited. A young man stepped out. He was in his early 20s, tall, with a mess of dark hair and a familiar, cautious tilt to his head. He looked like a faded photograph of me from 30 years ago. Leo? He asked. I'm Leo, I said. And you must be the boy named after me. He nodded, looking around at the house, the gardens, the silver SUV in the carport. Marcus told me where to find you. He said if I ever needed to see what a man looks like when he stops carrying other people's weight, I should come here. How is Marcus? I asked, pointing to a bench. He's good. He's a contractor in Oregon. He's tired, but he's honest. He told me the truth about my mother when I turned 18. Everything. The fake illnesses, the fire, the money. And Lily? The boy, his name was Leo, but he went by LJ. Look down at his boots. She got out of prison 3 years ago. She tried to find us. She sent letters claiming she had a new diagnosis, something with her spine this time. My dad burned the letters before I could read them, but he told me what they were. Last I heard, she's living in a halfway house in Nevada, still trying to find a lawyer to sue the state for medical neglect during her sentence. He looked up at me, his eyes searching mine. I didn't come here for money, Leo. I have a job. I'm apprenticing as an electrician. I wanted to see if the stories were true about the steakhouse. I sat down next to him. The sun was warm on my neck. They're true. I left my dinner halfway through the main course. I didn't even get to taste the steak. Was it worth it? He asked. The silence? The years of them calling you a monster? It wasn't silence, LJ. It was peace. And as for being a monster, if taking care of yourself and refusing to be a prop in someone else's play makes you a monster, then I'm the happiest monster you'll ever meet. I invited him in for lunch. My wife made sandwiches, real ones, with thick bread and fresh vegetables. There was no drama. No one tapped a glass with a spoon. No one announced a miracle or a tragedy. We just talked about electrical grids and the way the tide pulled at the salt marsh behind the house. When he left that evening, he shook my hand. He looked lighter, as if seeing me had given him permission to finally stop waiting for his own life to be a disaster. I watched his taillights disappear down the drive. I went back inside and found my wife in the kitchen, clearing the plates. I picked up a towel and started drying. He's a good kid, she said. He is, I agreed. He's got the eyes of someone who's decided to stop being a shadow, like his uncle, she whispered, smiling. That night, I sat in my study and looked at a small framed photo on my desk. It wasn't of me, or Maya, or Nana. It was a photo I'd taken of the empty chair at that steakhouse table before I walked out. I'd snapped it with my flip phone in a moment of pure, crystalline spite, but I'd kept it for decades. I realized I didn't need it anymore. I took the photo out of the frame, tore it into 4 neat pieces, and dropped them into the wastebasket. The story was over. The debt was paid. The ghost had finally left the room. I walked down the hall to my bedroom, the floorboards solid and silent under my feet. I climbed into bed, listened to the sound of the ocean through the open window, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I wasn't waiting for a phone call. I wasn't waiting for a crisis. I was just a man, in a house he'd built, living a life he'd earned. And for the first time in 50 years, I didn't think about the steak at all. When I turned 60, the world had changed in ways the boy in the steakhouse never could have imagined. Screens were everywhere. The Leo Vance Center was an institution, and the silence I'd fought so hard for had become a natural, permanent part of my atmosphere. I was retired. I spent my mornings on the porch of the coastal house, watching the fog roll off the Atlantic. My hands were weathered from years of gardening and the occasional woodwork project. Maya was a leader in her field now, a mother herself, raising a son who was currently fascinated by the tide pools behind our house. I was sitting in my study, a room filled with the scent of old paper and sea salt, when I received a digital notification from a social worker in Nevada. Lily was gone. She hadn't died in a dramatic cardiac event. There was no miracle or tragedy at the end of her script. She had passed away quietly in her sleep from complications related to years of smoking and a sedentary lifestyle. No heart murmur, no rare condition, just the inevitable wear and tear of a body that had been used as a prop for too long. The social worker informed me that as her next of kin, I was responsible for her remains. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't call Marcus. I drove to Nevada alone. The facility was a gray, low-slung building on the outskirts of a desert town. It smelled of industrial cleaner and dust. The social worker handed me a small cardboard box. It contained everything Lily had left, a few changes of clothes, a stack of legal papers from her failed lawsuits, and a single, cracked mirror she'd kept by her bed. She didn't have anyone, the woman said, looking at me with a mix of pity and curiosity. She talked about a brother who was a millionaire, but no one really believed her. She was difficult. I know, I said. I took the box to a local park. I sat on a bench under a scorched palm tree and went through the papers. I found a diary she'd started in prison. I expected it to be full of the old lies, the fainting spells, and the broken heart. But the last entry, dated 2 days before she died, was different. I saw a photo of Leo's building in a magazine today. It's all glass. I wonder if he can see through it, or if he just likes the way it reflects everything back. I spent my whole life making people look at me. I never realized that once they look, they They eventually see what's actually there, and there was nothing there. Just a girl who was told she was dying until she believed it. I closed the diary. I didn't feel a surge of grief. I didn't feel a sudden realization of what could have been. I just felt a quiet, heavy sadness for the waste of it all. She had been the sun, and she had burned herself out trying to keep the planets in place. I arranged for a simple cremation. I didn't buy a headstone. I didn't hold a service. I took the ashes to the edge of the desert where the wind was constant and the sand was clean. I opened the urn and let the wind take her. She wasn't a miracle anymore. She wasn't a tragedy. She was just dust, returning to a place where no one had to watch her. I drove back to the coast, the desert heat fading into the cool, damp air of the shore. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw my grandson, Leo, running toward the car. He was 5 years old, his knees scraped, his face smudged with dirt. "Grandpa, I found a crab. Come see." I climbed out of the car, my joints creaking, and followed him down to the water. I watched him poke at a tide pool, his eyes wide with wonder at a world that was real and tangible and didn't require him to be anything but a curious little boy. "It's beautiful, Leo," I said, sitting on a rock beside him. "Is it yours?" he asked, looking at the ocean. "No," I said, ruffling his hair. "It's yours. Everything you see. It's all yours." I looked out at the horizon, where the blue of the water met the blue of the sky. The boy at the steakhouse was gone. The sister in the shadow was gone. The parents who were blind were gone. There was only the tide, coming in and going out, steady and honest and clear. I walked back up to the house, the light from the kitchen window spilling across the lawn like a path. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and sat down at the table. My wife had set a plate for me. It was simple food, bread, cheese, a bowl of fruit. I picked up my fork and started to eat. I didn't have to leave. I didn't have to hide. I was home. And for the first time in 60 years, I finished the entire meal. By the time I hit 75, the steakhouse was a memory so old it felt like a scene from a movie I'd watched once and mostly forgotten. I was sitting on my porch, the wood silvered by decades of salt and sun. My joints ached in the way that reminded me I'd lived a full, physical life, one built on manual labor first and intellectual rigor second. Maya was visiting with LJ and his kids. My house was full of the sound of 3 generations of people who didn't owe each other anything but affection. There were no debts of care, no manufactured crises, no one weaponizing their health to get a bigger slice of the pie. LJ sat down next to me, handing me a glass of cold water. He was a master electrician now, graying at the temples, a man of substance. "I found something in an old box of my dad's," LJ said, pulling out a small, yellowed clipping. "It's a photo of the valedictorian ceremony from your graduation year. You're standing on the stage, but the camera caught the front row, too." I took the clipping. There I was, 18, gaunt, eyes burning with a mixture of terror and defiance. In the front row, my parents were looking at Lily. She was leaning against my father's shoulder, her hand over her mouth as if she were about to cough. They weren't even facing the stage. They were looking at the girl who was pretending to be sick during the 1 minute I was being honored for being brilliant. "I used to hate this photo," I said, my voice a low rasp. "I used to look at it and feel like I didn't exist." "And now?" LJ asked. "Now I look at it and realize I was the only one in that frame who was actually free. They were trapped in a loop. I was the only one moving forward." I handed the clipping back to him. "Keep it or burn it. It doesn't belong to me anymore." That night, after the house went quiet and the grandkids were tucked into the guest rooms, I walked down to the shoreline. The moon was a sharp silver sliver over the Atlantic. I thought about the sheer gravity of a life, how much energy my parents had spent feeding a lie, how much energy Lily had spent being a vacuum, and how much energy I had spent just trying to stand upright. I realized that the greatest achievement of my life wasn't the CEO title or the millions in the scholarship fund or the building with my name on it. It was the fact that I was dying a happy man. A week later, I had a small stroke. It wasn't a tragedy and it wasn't a miracle. It was just biology. I woke up in a hospital bed with Maya holding my hand. She didn't look terrified. She didn't look like she was waiting for a script to follow. She just looked like a daughter who loved her father. "The doctors say you need to rest, Dad," she whispered. "I've been resting for 40 years, Maya," I said, my voice a bit slurred but my mind as sharp as a fresh blade. "I'm fine," and I was. I spent 3 days in the ward. I watched the nurses. I thanked the doctors, and I didn't once ask for a private room or special treatment. I was just another man in a bed, and that was the highest honor I could imagine. When I got home, I went straight to my desk. I wrote one last check to the Nana Foundation, the final remainder of my personal liquid assets. I didn't need it. I had the house, the pension, and more than enough memories to keep the chill off. I sat back in my chair and looked at the wall. There were no photos of Lily, no photos of my parents, just a picture of Nana standing in her kitchen with that checkbook in her hand, looking like a queen. I closed my eyes and let the sound of the ocean fill my head. I had accepted the offer. I had left the dinner. I had walked out into the night with nothing but a check and a grandmother who believed in me. I had turned $10,000 into a legacy and a shadow into a man. I'm Leo Vance. I've lived a life that was entirely my own. I didn't stay for the dessert, and I didn't wait for the apology. I just lived. And as the sun dipped below the horizon for the last time, I knew I hadn't missed a single thing. I died on a Tuesday. It wasn't a crisis. There were no sirens, no frantic pacing in hospital hallways, and no one calling a press conference to announce a miracle. I was 84 years old, sitting in my favorite leather chair with a book on my lap and the smell of the salt marsh drifting through the open window. My heart simply decided it had done enough work. It didn't fail me. It just finished its shift. Maya found me an hour later. She told me later in the way I like to imagine she'd talk to me that I looked peaceful. I looked like a man who had finally closed every tab he'd ever opened. The funeral was held at the university, in the atrium of the building that bears my name. There were hundreds of people there. Most of them were scholarship kids. They were engineers, doctors, and teachers who had once been the invisible children in their own homes. They didn't come to mourn a titan of industry. They came to honor the man who had bought them their first laptops and told them it was okay to leave the dinner table. LJ spoke. He stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, and he didn't talk about my net worth or my career. "Leo Vance taught me that family isn't a blood type," he said, his voice steady. "It's a choice. He taught me that you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep people warm who aren't even cold." He was a man who lived in the light because he knew exactly how heavy the shadows could be. After the service, Maya and LJ took a small boat out into the Atlantic. They went past the breakers to the spot where the water turns a deep, bruised purple. They didn't say a prayer. They didn't read a poem. Maya just opened the urn and let the wind catch the ashes. I wasn't a shadow anymore. I wasn't a ghost. I was the salt in the air, the cold snap of the spray, and the vast, unburdened horizon. Back at the house, the sun was setting. The Vance Center was humming with the sound of students building the future. Somewhere in a small town, a kid was sitting at a dinner table, feeling like a ghost, realizing for the first time that the door wasn't locked. I started as a rock spinning in someone else's orbit. I ended as the stars. I'm Leo Vance. I lived, I left, and I never looked back. Legacy isn't a building or a bank account. It's the absence of a ghost. A year after I was gone, Maya sat in my study. She didn't find any hidden debts, any secret second families, or any lingering resentment tucked into the back back of a drawer. She found a filing cabinet organized by year, a collection of her own drawings from kindergarten, and a single, worn-out pair of gardening gloves. She told LJ later that the house felt different without me, but it didn't feel heavy. Most people leave behind a mess of what-ifs and if-onlys. I left a vacuum that was quickly filled by the lives of the people I actually loved. LJ's son, the one who looked like me, got into the university on his own merit. He didn't use the Vance name to get an edge. He didn't have to. He walked into that glass building, saw my name on the wall, and didn't feel like he had to live up to a myth. He just felt like he belonged there. He was a kid who knew his father loved him, which meant he didn't have to spend his life proving he existed. That's the real trick. The generational curse of the sick sister and the invisible son ended with me. It didn't leak into Maya. It didn't touch LJ's kids. I took all that poison, all that manufactured tragedy and hollow worship, and I buried it in the yard of a house I eventually sold. Back in the old town, the cemetery where my parents and Lily were buried eventually fell into slight disrepair. The town grew, the suburbs shifted, and the miracle girl was just another name on a stone that no one visited. There was no one left to tell the stories of her emergencies. Without an audience, the drama finally, truly died. But at the university, every September, a new batch of kids walks through the doors of the Vance Center. One of them, usually a quiet one, the one who looks like they've been doing their own laundry since they were 10, finds the small plaque near the library. It doesn't list my awards. It just has a quote I wrote for the dedication ceremony. The door is never locked. You don't have to finish the meal. You just have to start the walk. I was the boy who left. I was the man who stayed away. And in the end, I was the grandfather who made sure no one else ever felt like a shadow. The Atlantic still hits the rocks behind my house. The wind still smells like salt. And somewhere, in a steakhouse that doesn't exist anymore, a chair is still empty. I'm Leo Vance. I'm gone. And for the first time in the history of my bloodline, everyone is exactly where they're supposed to be. The silence of a house after the owner is gone is usually heavy with ghosts, but my house stayed light. Maya kept it for a few years, using it as a retreat when the city got too loud. She told LJ that sometimes she'd sit on the porch with a glass of wine and swear she could hear the rhythmic times, snip-snip times of my gardening shears from the hydrangea bushes. It wasn't a haunting, it was a rhythm. Eventually, she sold it to a young couple, a doctor and a teacher. She told them the history of the place, not the dark parts, but the parts about the man who built a fortress of peace out of a shoebox of landscaping money. She left them my old gardening gloves and a note about which tide pools the crabs like to hide in. The Vance name moved on. In the decades that followed, the miracle of Lily became a cautionary tale in family psychology textbooks, though her name was changed to protect the privacy she had spent her life trying to give away to anyone with a camera. Researchers studied the golden child, invisible child dynamic, using our story as the blueprint for how a family can cannibalize itself in the name of a lie. I became a case study in resilience, but to me, I was just a guy who liked lobster ravioli and quiet nights. LJ's kids grew up. One became an architect, one a vet. They lived lives that were boringly, beautifully normal. They didn't have to overcome anything because I had already taken the brunt of the impact. I was the shield that let them be average, or brilliant, or whatever they wanted to be, without the weight of a sister's fragile heart pressing down on their chests. 100 years after that graduation dinner, a student at the university was doing a project on the founders of the engineering wing. She dug through the archives and found the old digital records, the photos of the scholarship ceremonies, the articles about the cybersecurity firm, and that one grainy, black and white scan of me at 18. She wrote a paper about the Vance philosophy. She argued that my greatest contribution to the field of security wasn't the encryption protocols or the decentralized networks. It was the idea that a system is only as strong as its most ignored component. That if you neglect the healthy parts to obsess over a single, manufactured vulnerability, the whole structure eventually collapses. She ended her paper with a photo of the empty chair at the steakhouse, which had somehow survived in the digital cloud. Leo Vance didn't just build walls, she wrote. He built exits. He proved that the most secure thing a person can do is walk away from a fire they didn't start. The town where it all began is different now. The steakhouse is a memory of a memory. The house with the lavender candles was torn down to make way for a modern apartment complex. The loose floorboard in the closet where I hid my shoebox is gone, replaced by concrete and steel. But the walk continues. Every year, another kid realizes they don't belong at the table they were born to. Every year, someone accepts an offer from a nana or a friend or their own internal voice, and they stand up before the main course is served. They walk out into the cool night air, they feel the sting of the ungrateful label on their back, and they keep moving until the labels fall off. I'm Leo Vance. I'm a name on a building, a footnote in a textbook, and a handful of salt in the Atlantic. But more than that, I'm the proof. The sun doesn't belong to the person who screams the loudest. It belongs to the person who stays awake long enough to see it rise. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And finally, so are you.